The air feels rehearsed, like everyone is pretending to grieve in the same measured rhythm. The old clock ticks without sympathy, marking time between shallow condolences and the quiet scraping of chair legs. Someone coughs, too softly to be sincere, and the lawyer's voice, brittle with formality, cuts through the silence. He speaks of fairness, of duty, of love, and yet each word lands like a blade turned in velvet. Eyes lower, hands tighten, breaths shorten. There's a name missing, one that should have been spoken. The moment stretches. Tension trembles in the air like heat before lightning. No one dares to meet the one pair of eyes that waits, hopeful and unguarded, until the realization settles. They've been erased. And in that erasure, something dark begins to breathe. The silence after the reading feels louder than the storm outside. Words hang unfinished in the room like smoke that refuses to clear. The lawyer's papers rustle, a frail sound against the waves beating the cliffs, and eyes shift toward the one whose name was not spoken. There is no outburst, no demand for answers, only that stillness, dense with disbelief, the kind that breaks differently for each person. Someone reaches for a glass of water, another for distraction. The lawyer folds the will with too much care, as though afraid to touch it again. Beneath all this restraint lies a pulse of shame and vindication that no one admits to feeling. The will has been read, but the truth of it hasn't yet landed. The lawyer tries to leave, but the air won't let him. Every movement feels observed. The papers in his briefcase whisper, as if alive, betraying secrets they hold. Someone asks a question. Simple, trembling. Was that all of it? He nods too quickly. The sound of the latch clicking shut feels final, but nothing here is finished. Beneath the polished table, a foot taps anxiously. The door opens to the hallway's dim light, and suddenly, it feels like the house itself exhales, as if this ritual of inheritance has summoned something heavier than grief. The corridor smells of cedar and sea salt. Old portraits line the walls, faces of ancestors who once decided fates with equal cruelty. Ethan walks alone, each footstep echoing too loudly. Down the hall, he hears faint voices, his siblings speaking in urgent whispers. Words like policy, signature, and beneficiary float through the air before vanishing behind a closing door. Something cold stirs in his chest, not quite anger, not yet resolve, just the awareness that the story isn't what it appears to be. The will was only the beginning. The storm peaks as night deepens. The house hums with the uneasy quiet that follows revelation. Ethan stands in his father's old study, surrounded by the scent of tobacco and leather. On the desk, papers lie scattered, edges curling from moisture in the air. He stares at a framed photo, his father's arm around him frozen in the illusion of closeness. Outside, a flash of lightning ignites the room for an instant, illuminating a letter, half hidden beneath an accounts ledger. He pulls it free. His own name stares back from the paper. The sound of the wind deepens to a low moan as realization trembles in his breath. The will might have excluded him, but somewhere else, his name was written. Morning arrives gray and airless, as if the storm has stolen all the color from the world. The house feels different now, smaller, quieter, almost aware. Coffee brews somewhere unseen, its scent heavy and bitter. No one speaks at first. The silence between them has become an agreement. The lawyer's absence is a relief and a threat all at once. Then Margaret mentions the insurance letter. Her voice is casual, but her eyes flicker like a warning. Ethan listens without moving, the words sliding over him like rain on glass. No one asks how she knows about it. The family has always had ways of finding what should stay hidden. The conversation shifts to practicalities. Estate division, property titles, memorial plans. But underneath each polite sentence lurks a question no one asks aloud. Who told the truth? Lenon's tone trembles, then steadies. Daniel dismisses her with a flicker of his hand, the gesture of a man who believes control is his inheritance. Ethan says nothing. though every word spoken seems to scrape against him. Margaret interrupts softly, almost lovingly, and the room goes still. There's a new power in her calm, something deliberate, when she says, "Not everything was meant for everyone." It sounds like prophecy. Later, the lawyer calls back. His voice crackles through the phone, thin and hesitant. He wants to clarify certain elements, but his tone suggests apology. Ethan listens, every muscle tight. A pause, then a stuttered confession. The insurance file was signed just 2 days before Richard's death. He can't recall if Margaret was present, though her signature appears as witness. The line fills with static before the call drops. Outside, thunder murmurs again, though the sky is clear. That evening, Margaret hosts dinner as if nothing has changed. Silver polished, candles lit, conversation forced. The sound of knives on porcelain fills the space between their careful smiles. Lena drinks too quickly. Daniel watches her, calculating. Ethan barely touches his food. When Margaret raises her glass to family, no one meets her eyes. For a moment, it feels like the house itself leans closer, listening for cracks in their civility. Then the thunder returns, distant, deliberate, like the past clearing its throat. Night again, long after the dishes have been cleared. Rain starts once more, thin at first, then furious. Ethan moves through the darkened halls, footsteps careful, drawn to something he can't name. He stops at his father's locked cabinet. The key, once always around Richard's neck, now hangs from the portrait's frame. He turns it, and the lock yields with a sigh. Inside, folders, insurance, property, personal letters. His fingers find one envelope addressed in his father's handwriting, to be read if anything happens to me. Outside, a gust rattles the windows, and a flash of lightning turns the world white. The letter trembles in his hands before he even breaks the seal. His father's handwriting, once so precise, now slants with exhaustion. The words are sparse, deliberate, like they were written in the dark. Apologies without context, warnings without detail. "You must understand," it says, "what I've done was to protect you from them, and them from you." Ethan reads it twice, unable to find comfort in any line. He feels the house listening, the silence swelling around him like breath. Somewhere in the distance, the floorboards creak, though no one moves. The next morning dawns too bright. The storm has cleared, but the calm feels rehearsed. Margaret sits in the sunroom, perfectly composed, tea in hand, as if serenity itself could erase suspicion. Ethan approaches, the letter folded in his pocket, the words still burning. Their conversation begins politely. Weather, arrangements, condolences, but turns sharp the moment he mentions the life insurance. Her eyes lift, calm, unblinking. "Your father trusted me," she says. The way she says trusted sounds more like feared. Lena finds Ethan later, her voice trembling on the edge of confession. She speaks in half sentences, eyes darting to every doorway. There had been arguments before Richard's death. Voices raised, papers signed in haste. "He wanted to change everything," she whispers. Ethan presses her for details, but she falters, claiming she never saw the final version. Then, a name slips from her lips, the name of the witness who never appeared at the reading. Wow. Ethan feels the cold bloom of recognition. The name belongs to someone who shouldn't have been there that night. Ethan drives into town. The world beyond the estate feels strangely irrelevant. People smiling, walking dogs, unaware of the quiet rot that consumes his life. He finds the witness listed in the insurance file, a retired notary named Charles Avery. But when he reaches the address, the house stands empty, windows boarded, mail spilling from the slot. A neighbor appears, says softly that Mr. Avery passed away the same week. Richard did. The timing hits like thunder behind clear skies. That night, back in the mansion, the quiet feels wrong again. Ethan spreads the documents across the desk, cross-checking dates, signatures, margins. One page catches the light, ink smeared faintly by moisture. Under magnified scrutiny, a difference in pen pressure reveals itself. The second witness line is forged. The air thickens, heart beats in his ears. He remembers his mother's unshaken calm that morning, the way she'd said trusted, with that slight curl at the corner of her mouth. For the first time, he realizes the truth might be worse than greed. It might be love turned monstrous. The confrontation starts quietly, like all devastating things do. Ethan lays the forged document on the table during breakfast, between the fruit bowl and Margaret's teacup. No one speaks for a moment. The clock ticks. The house breathes. Daniel looks up first, confusion masking calculation. Lena goes still, spoon midair. Margaret's eyes rest on the paper as though it were a photograph of someone long dead. Then, softly, she says, "You should be careful what you call forgery." The words land like a confession, disguised as advice. Something in Ethan breaks, a tremor he doesn't hide. It's no longer about the money. It's about who his father trusted last. Morty, I'm sure. It's I know. Raw. Afterward, the house fills with footsteps and whispers. Daniel corners Margaret in the hall, their argument muffled by the thick walls. Ethan listens unseen, piecing together fragments, words like signature, timing, insurance. Margaret's tone never rises. She's a conductor of silence, guiding her children's guilt like a symphony. When she emerges, her face is composed, but the air shifts around her. She knows he heard. For the first time, their eyes meet not as mother and son, but as adversaries. Lena finds Ethan again, trembling but determined. She confesses what she couldn't before. She saw Margaret sign her father's witness line the night before he died. She said he was too weak to hold the pen, Lena whispers, tears trembling in her voice. But he was awake, Ethan. He saw her do it. The words fall like stones into deep water, impossible to retrieve. Ethan doesn't speak. He just stares at the rain pressing against the window pane. Somewhere behind them, the old house groans, tired of its secrets. Ethan confronts Margaret. The study becomes a courtroom, her silence the gavel. He demands answers. Why the will? Why the insurance? Why him? She answers each question with questions of her own, slicing logic into shreds. Your father's mind was gone, she says. He trusted people he shouldn't. Like you? He asks. The pause that follows feels eternal. Then she says, gently, especially me. He doesn't shout. He just breathes once, hard, and leaves the room. For the first time, she looks frightened, but only for a second. Night falls heavy. Ethan sits alone on the terrace, wind tearing through the surf below. He reads the letter again, hearing his father's voice in the rhythm of the rain. The lines he'd missed before now sting. The ones closest to you will rewrite the story before you have the strength to tell it. Lightning flashes inside the window behind him. A movement, a figure. Margaret's silhouette, watching. She doesn't move away even when he turns to face her. Two ghosts of the same bloodline, each holding a truth too ugly to speak. The morning arrives pale and soundless, as though even the waves are holding their breath. The family gathers without calling for it, gravitating to the same room, as if drawn by a shared instinct for reckoning. The air carries yesterday's storm in its stillness. No one sits. They hover in the spaces between words. Ethan places the forged document on the table again, but this time, he doesn't speak. It's Daniel who breaks first, voice cracking. You don't understand what she did it for. Silence answers. Then Margaret's eyes close, and when she opens them, there's something almost tender in her defeat. I did it, she says, but not for me. She explains in fragments, the debts, the business collapse, the calls from the bank. Richard had rewritten the will in a panic, cutting Ethan out not from hatred but to protect him from the family's ruin. The insurance, she claims, was her way of restoring what was stolen. Ethan listens, caught between disbelief and reluctant empathy. "You forged a life to fix another," he says quietly. She nods once, eyes wet but unwavering. "I forged a mistake into mercy." The logic stings because it almost sounds true. Daniel intervenes, desperate now. He admits his part. He'd known about the forgery, helped cover it to preserve the estate, to preserve her. His voice breaks under the weight of loyalty mistaken for love. Lena bursts, accusing both of them of betrayal, of rewriting history to fit their guilt. For the first time, Ethan watches his siblings not as enemies, but as casualties of their mother's control. The truth doesn't free them. It corrodes whatever was left of affection. By evening, the lawyer returns, unannounced, rain dripping from his coat. He looks older, paler. "The police will ask questions," he murmurs. Ethan notices his hands shaking. A man burdened by secrets not his own. He admits he destroyed the first will under Margaret's pressure, replaced it with a copy she dictated. His guilt spills like broken glass across the floor. "I thought it was mercy," he says, echoing her words. Outside, thunder answers like laughter. Inside, everyone stops pretending. Later that night, Ethan sits alone in the confession room, his father's study, now a ruin of paper and grief. The fireplace burns low, flickering across the last page of the letter. He realizes the truth cannot be undone, only inherited. The sound of footsteps echoes faintly. Margaret's slow and deliberate. She doesn't enter, only stands in the doorway. "Do you hate me?" she asks. Ethan doesn't look up. "No," he says. "I understand you." His voice is calm, but it sounds nothing like forgiveness. The storm has returned, but this time it sounds different. Hungrier, closer. Windows rattle, walls breathe in gusts. Ethan cannot sleep. Every shadow in the corridor seems to move. Downstairs, something claps. He follows the sound and finds Daniel rifling through the study drawers, panic etched into his every gesture. "We can still fix," Daniel whispers, eyes darting. But the papers he searches for, the originals, the proof, are gone. Only ashes remain in the fireplace, faintly warm. Someone has already rewritten the ending. Margaret moves through the house like a ghost, candle in hand, her robe trailing across the wooden floor. Lena follows her, pleading for truth, for forgiveness, for something human. But Margaret only says, "It's too late for apologies." The words sound more weary than cruel. When she turns, her face catches the candlelight, and behind her, faint smoke curls upward through a crack in the wall. Neither of them notices. The house has decided to end the argument itself. Ethan smells it before he sees it, the sharp sweetness of burning wood. He runs toward the scent, heart pounding. Flames bloom along the wall near the study door, licking upward as if tracing the path of their lies. Daniel shouts for water, but the storm outside answers instead, wind feeding the fire through a broken window pane. In the chaos, Lena screams Margaret's name. Somewhere between thunderclaps, a small explosion of glass rings out, the whiskey decanter shattering in the heat. Time fractures. Everything becomes light and smoke. Margaret stands in the foyer, candle still burning though the air trembles with heat. She does not run. She watches the fire spread like a living thing reclaiming its home. "He built this house to last forever," she murmurs. Ethan grabs her arm, pulling her toward the exit, but she resists. "Everything worth keeping is already gone," she says. For a moment, their faces are inches apart, mother and son, mirror and wound. Then the ceiling groans, timbers splitting above them. He drags her away just before it collapses. They make it outside, coughing, soaked by rain that feels almost merciful. Behind them, the Holloway estate burns, windows exploding outward. Flames, twisting like language. Daniel collapses to his knees in the mud. Lena sobs, clutching her mother's arm as if afraid she'll vanish too. Ethan watches the roof cave in, his father's portrait visible for one final instant before the wall gives way. The fire reflects in his eyes. Not victory, not justice, just an ending. Somewhere in the roaring wind, the sea keeps beating against the cliffs, erasing everything. Dawn comes pale, the color of breath on cold glass. The sea lies calm again, as though it never raged. Smoke still rises from the ruins of the Holloway estate, curling lazily into the soft sky. The family sits in the wet grass, silent. No one cries. The fire has taken everything that could be argued over. Ethan stands apart, watching the last embers flicker out in the wreckage. Somewhere in the ashes, his father's voice feels closer than it ever did in life. He thinks of the insurance letter, of Margaret's trembling confession, of the weight of being chosen when love was the cost. Later, the police arrive, polite but efficient, moving through debris that still smolders. Their questions are procedural: insurance, property, documents. Ethan answers with quiet precision, the truth now stripped of emotion. Margaret says nothing, her gaze lost to the sea. One officer mentions that the insurance company confirmed the beneficiary line as valid. Ethan doesn't react. He signs what they give him, his name flowing ink-smooth across the page that once defined betrayal. The sound of pen on paper feels heavier than fire. Margaret retreats into silence. She sits by the cliff's edge for hours, eyes fixed on the horizon. Ethan approaches, unsure whether to speak or leave her in peace. Finally, she turns slightly and says, "He would have hated what I did." Her voice is brittle but steady. Ethan replies, "He already did." For a moment, something flickers in her expression. Shame, maybe gratitude. The wind catches her hair, tangles it like seaweed, and she looks suddenly fragile, human, unguarded. Then she says, "It's your house now, though there is no house left to claim." Days pass. Insurance inspectors, neighbors, the low hum of reconstruction talk fill the silence like static. Lena and Daniel leave quietly, taking only what wasn't burned. Margaret refuses to leave the coast. Ethan signs the final transfer documents alone at the lawyer's office, his name printed beside the word beneficiary. The ink looks ordinary, but it feels like blood. As he walks out, he doesn't look back. The paper may say he's inherited everything, but what's left of the family has already dissolved into memory. At dusk, Ethan returns to the cliffs one last time. The wind carries the scent of smoke, faint but permanent. He opens the last envelope from the ruins, a letter from his father, half-burned but legible. Inheritance is not what survives you, but what you leave behind in others. He reads it aloud, his voice barely audible against the tide. When he finishes, he folds the letter and lets it go. The wind takes it, scattering ash and paper over the sea. Behind him, the horizon glows faintly, like memory refusing to die.